Dear Patriots, before the news starts, please subscribe to our patriotic channel by clicking the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up to this video. Don't forget to leave your opinion below in the comments section. Share the news on Facebook and Twitter so your friends see it. Thank you.
DC's new Russian envoy gets frosty reception. Russia's new ambassador to the United States has been described as both ruthless and charming. Since his arrival in Washington 6 months ago, he has emphasized the charm, hosting parties, giving speeches and even launching a bluegrass-backed embassy podcast at a moment of bitter U.S. Russian relations. But Anatoly Antonov says he has been disappointed to find a cold reception on Capitol Hill, where he's had a hard time obtaining meetings. Some lawmakers' offices have even asked him not to publicize the sessions. Antonov's first meeting with a U.S. lawmaker came 3 months into his tenure, when he sat down in December with Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. His most recent, with Republican Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, took place on Tuesday. The Congress, overwhelmed by Russophobia, is led by politically biased emotions, rather than a clear-thinking mind, the Kremlin envoy told a Politico reporter, who interviewed him in a combination of written and face-to-face chats. We are bluntly told they fear criticism. U.S. lawmakers are going beyond the silent treatment. Some successfully pushed the District of Columbia to recently rename a stretch of road outside the Russian embassy to honor Boris Nemtsov, a critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin who was gunned down near the Kremlin in 2015. That hasn't stopped Antonov from opening the heavy gates of his fortified embassy compound north of Georgetown, where the Russian flag was lowered to half-staff last month in observance of the school shootings in Parkland, Florida. At a recent Russian film screening at the embassy, where guests nibbled on meat and cheese under the watchful eyes of plainclothes Russian security guards, Antonov was quick with a smile, and heavy on scripted Kremlin talking points, as he discussed the political climate in a Washington rattled by Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russia's suspected role in the 2016 U.S. election. "All I hear is meddling, interference," complained Antonov, drink in hand and eyebrows raised. "I don't know these words. I want to talk about friendship, cooperation." A former top official in Russia's foreign and defense ministries with a specialty in arms control, Antonov, who is in his early 60s, is no stranger to working with U.S. officials, particularly when he was a lead negotiator on the 2010 New START nuclear agreement. Antonov did tell Politico he has received quite a warm and friendly welcome at the White House and State Department, though he did not offer details of those meetings, but he lamented that the constructive attitude of my American colleagues does not turn from words into practice. Despite President Donald Trump's often expressed desire to work with Putin, his Republican administration, under bipartisan pressure from a skeptical Congress, has generally kept in place tough Obama-era policies toward Russia. The White House did not respond to a query about how often Antonov has visited there and with whom he has met. A chummy May 2017 Oval Office visit by Antonov's predecessor, Sergei Kislyak, and Russia's foreign minister caused a furor after Trump reportedly shared classified counterterrorism intelligence with his foreign guests. Trump has encountered Antonov at least once, in September, when the Russian envoy joined other new ambassadors to formally present his credentials to the U.S. leader. Meanwhile, Antonov's reception on Capitol Hill has been downright frosty. Contacts with Kislyak caused grief for several Trump associates, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from the Justice Department's Russia investigation after giving shifting accounts of his 2016 talks with the Russian envoy while he was a senator and Trump campaign advisor. After what happened to Jeff Sessions, no member wants to be in the press for meeting with the Russian ambassador, said a congressional aide, adding that any lawmaker who does meet with Antonov should be upfront about it. At least for now, any meeting would have to be bipartisan and publicly acknowledged. And even under those conditions, there's not much common ground for a fruitful discussion. Congressional officials also worry that the Kremlin could exploit such a meeting for propaganda purposes, to obscure the fact that most U.S. lawmakers are suspicious of Moscow's motives and support tougher sanctions on the country. Politico reached out to more than 4 dozen Senate and House offices, mainly those of lawmakers on the Foreign Affairs committees. Most didn't reply. Several said the Russians haven't requested a meeting. Of the lawmakers whose offices Politico queried, only 2 acknowledged meeting Antonov, Johnson and Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, a Tennessee Republican. Corker's office said he met with Antonov in February and that the pair discussed issues ranging from Russian election interference to shared interests, including recent arms control developments. Corker met with Antonov on the recommendation of U.S. Ambassador to Russia John Huntsman, his office said. According to a congressional staffer, Huntsman, who arrived in Moscow last October, has told U.S. lawmakers of his own difficulty arranging meetings with Russian officials. Russia often emphasizes the diplomatic principle of reciprocity, and Huntsman has indicated that his situation in Moscow could be linked to Antonov's challenges in Washington. The U.S. ambassador told reporters in January that he'd spoken to Antonov about it. "I wish we had more meetings, and we will continue to ask," Huntsman said, according to Russian news agency Interfax. "It is important on both sides that we have access to senior people, because unless you're talking to people, you cannot create a dialogue and you cannot solve issues together." Huntsman, too, has confronted questions about election meddling. In late February, he denied allegations that the U.S. is trying to interfere in Russia's March 18 presidential election. "I don't know how that's possible," Huntsman said, according to Moscow's TASS news service. Antonov and his aides declined to address specifics about his meetings with lawmakers. Johnson, who also sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, met with Antonov in December ahead of a planned visit to Russia. Johnson scrapped the trip after a fellow senator who planned to join him, New Hampshire Democrat Jeanne Shaheen, was denied a visa. Hatch met with Antonov at the Russian embassy on Tuesday. The Utah senator arranged the meeting, which included emissaries of the Mormon Church. The Utah-based church has faced challenges operating in Russia. Senator Hatch met with the Russian ambassador and LDS church leaders this afternoon to discuss U.S. Russian relations, religious issues, and the hope that the ambassador will accept the invitation to visit Utah in the near future, said Hatch spokesman Matt Whitlock. A tweet from the Russian embassy featuring a photo of Antonov shaking hands with Hatch declared that, both sides agreed on importance of restoring normalcy in our relations. Antonov is described as more hard-edged than Kislyak, a soft-spoken but well-connected figure who generally avoided the media. He has a reputation of being particularly assertive when it comes to promoting and protecting Russia's military capabilities. The European Union has sanctioned Antonov for his role in orchestrating Russian aggression in Ukraine, though he has not been sanctioned by Washington. "He can turn on the charm, and he could also be a Rottweiler," said Alexander Vershbow, a former U.S. ambassador to Russia. "I don't think he wants to burn bridges in his first year." Added a former Western diplomat, "At the end of the day, he's quite ruthless and a political survivor." And now, Antonov's instincts are leading him to reach out to Americans instead of hunkering down in his massive embassy compound. He has instructed aides to get out more often, and attend functions around Washington, D.C., to gauge the temperature on Russia-U.S. relations, according to Russia experts in Washington. Antonov himself often leaves the U.S. Capitol to spread a message of good fault will. But he can be firm about Russia's prerogatives, even if it means mocking the United States. During a trip last fall to San Francisco, where Antonov reportedly stopped by Russian consular facilities shut down by the U.S. government, he rejected allegations of any Russian role in the 2016 campaign while slyly critiquing the American political system. "It's said by your president that the United States is a superpower. Nobody can beat it," Antonov said, according to one press account. "Please. What just happened?" Antonov's embassy now releases a weekly newsletter and podcast, whose host begins each episode by saying, "Hello, America," or "Good morning, America," amid the energetic music of a Russian bluegrass band. The ambassador described the approach as a modern revival of a Soviet legacy. During World War II, the Soviet embassy used to publish information bulletins. Now we basically do the same thing, Only we post it online, Antonov wrote in response to a series of questions. Reality shows that leading American media practically does not use Russian original info sources. We are trying to fill this gap. Antonov is also continuing to pursue Kislyak's tradition of hosting cultural events, including by showing modern Russian films. In February, the embassy drew a large audience eager to watch Going Vertical, a Russian movie based on the Soviet Union's improbable 1972 Olympics gold medal win over the heavily favored U.S. men's basketball team, a contest the U.S. considered stolen by suspicious refereeing. While Antonov said he plans to deliver several speeches in Washington in the coming months, he feels his message seems to resonate best elsewhere in the United States. The further from Washington, he wrote, the less prejudice towards Russia. How Trump's trade war finally broke Gary Cohn. New York, Wall Street is losing its main man in the White House. Gary Cohn, the hard-charging former Goldman Sachs president who eased market fears about President Donald Trump's erratic presidency, said Tuesday he would leave in the coming weeks after losing a bruising internal battle over trade. Cohn, a New York Democrat and avowed free trader, tried desperately to persuade Trump not to impose sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum, arguing they would kick off a global trade war that could damage the U.S. economy. Trump so far has ignored Cohn's advice, siding with nationalist advisors who strongly favor the tariffs. A meeting planned for Thursday at the White House with executives from companies that could be hurt by tariffs has now been canceled. Cohn, known in his decades on Wall Street as a pugnacious trader, is not leaving the fight right away. He plans to stay on for at least a couple of weeks and continue to battle Trump and the White House nationalists to more carefully tailor the tariffs to avoid antagonizing allies and inviting retribution. But he's given up hope of winning the battle completely, people close to him said. One person close to Cohn called the loss over tariffs a breaking point for an advisor who drafted resignation letters last year after Trump's response to a white supremacist march in Charlottesville, Virginia. While the steel loss served as the immediate trigger, Cohn had been planning his exit for over a month. He told Trump 6 weeks ago that he planned to leave at some point in early 2018 after completing his main agenda item, the $1.5 trillion tax cut the president signed into law late last year. Trump asked him to stay to help with his trip to an international economic forum in Davos, Switzerland, and the State of the Union address. Then he asked him to stay for the rollout of an infrastructure plan. Cohn decided within the past few days there would be no perfect time to leave, according to a person familiar with his thinking. Now was the time to pull the trigger, especially given his frustration over the trade fight. Cohn also wanted to start returning calls from top companies offering jobs, something he would not do while still working on policies that could impact those companies. There was no big Oval Office meeting or showdown between Trump and Cohn on Tuesday. The pair spent a good bit of time together during the day. Cohn sat in on Trump's meeting with Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, though he didn't attend their joint news conference. Instead, Cohn huddled in his office with NEC staff members to let them know of his plans before the news broke. The tight-knit group shared a few laughs. Nobody was really surprised. They'd expected Cohn's announcement for weeks, though many expressed sadness afterward. He's been an incredible boss, and it's been one of the most amazing years of my life, one NEC official said. There could be more turnover on the NEC staff following Cohn's departure, depending on who ascends to the top job. The only name currently in wide circulation is Larry Kudlow, the economic commentator and former Reagan administration official. Kudlow, who urged Cohn to stick around, was caught by surprise by the announcement. Like Cohn, Kudlow has been highly critical of Trump's decision on tariffs, something that could make it harder for him to get the job. While Cohn's plans to leave were widely known for a while, the bitter internal fight over steel clearly accelerated his departure. Last week, Cohn told White House Chief of Staff John Kelly that if Trump launched a full-scale trade war, he would have to quit. The threat did not stop Trump from announcing the tariffs. and so far Cohn has not been able to slow down the president's march toward enacting the levies. The president reiterated Tuesday during the joint news conference that he wanted the tariffs and didn't fear a trade war. One main question now is how markets will respond to Cohn's departure. Dow futures tumbled Tuesday evening as traders digested the news. Cohn has been widely seen as a steadying hand in the White House, pushing Trump away from some of his most aggressive instincts on trade and keeping the U.S. in the North American Free Trade Agreement, among other deals. The fear now is that Trump will be fully unleashed unless he hires another figure trusted by Wall Street for the NEC job. Clearly he's a free trader, and Wall Street likes free traders. And he's got the Goldman Sachs pedigree, and that's a very comforting thing for people, said Stephen Massock of Wedbush Securities. It's clearly going to be at least a minor negative for markets. But probably not a huge downturn, especially if Trump picks Kudlow, who would be a wonderful choice. In a note to clients Tuesday, Ian Katz of Capital Alpha Partners suggested the White House could now be without anyone with a real understanding of markets. More than anyone else in the White House, Cohn had credibility with the markets, he said. He speaks Wall Street's language. Cohn for now has no plans to return to Wall Street but is likely to entertain offers from a number of the nation's largest companies. He grew up in Ohio and bounced around different schools while battling dyslexia. Cohn began his professional career at U.S. Steel and is said by those who know him to want to return to a more Main Street career rather than go back into finance. There is no succession plan in place at the NEC, people familiar with the matter said. In addition to Kudlow, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney is on the list, according to one Trump advisor. The president likes both of them, the advisor added, and either could serve the White House well on both the substance of policy as well as with the economic message. Andrew Ristusa and Nancy Cook contributed to this report. Voters divided on Trump's steel and aluminum tariff plan. Voters are split on President Donald Trump's plan to impose steel and aluminum tariffs, according to a new Politico, Morning Consult poll. Nearly 40% of the roughly 2,000 registered voters surveyed said that they support the decision, while 35% of voters oppose it. Party affiliation played a large role in how voters felt about the promised action. 65% of Republicans supported the move, compared with 24% of Democrats. Over half of the voters polled, 52%, think the tariffs will make steel and aluminum more expensive. Half of the voters polled believe actions other than tariffs could help promote American-made goods. 50% of voters think more free trade agreements will help open new markets to domestic goods and services. About 25% of those surveyed think tariffs and other barriers are effective against internationally produced products. On Tuesday, Trump said he wouldn't back down on the proposed tariffs despite intense backlash from the Republican Party. Trump has said that he plans to impose a 25% tariff on steel imports and 10% on aluminum, with details to be announced this week. The Politico, Morning Consult poll was conducted March 1 to 5, surveying 1,993 registered voters. The margin of sampling error is plus or minus 2 percentage points. Morning Consult is a nonpartisan media and technology company that provides data-driven research and insights on politics, policy and business strategy. More details on the poll and its methodology can be found in these two documents, Doplins, here vertical bar crosstabs, here.